That's what he said. Communication tips for law firm owners. If there's one thing that I struggle with, let alone anybody else listening to this, it's communication, right? Like, we're the lawyers, we're the experts. We've done this for so long. We ask somebody to jump in on one part or handle it. We don't give them enough context, yada, yada, yada. I'm sure you can finish the story. I hope I'm not the only one there. If I am, nobody else will watch this, but I'll learn a ton. So either way, we'll see how it goes. That being said, I posted a comment in our Solutions for Lawyers group about communication, and Omeed had the best response with so many different methodologies, things you've done. So I was like, hey, man, I could ask you a bunch of questions here, but please come on the show because I would love to hear about it. For anybody that don't know him, Omeed Tabiei is the entrepreneur's lawyer. His career started in government writing tax policies for small businesses, where he developed a passion for business and entrepreneurship. If that's not enough, he was the second lawyer hired at Hyperloop One, where he helped the company raise their $50 million Series B financing and grow from about 60 employees to over 300. If that's not enough, he has big law experience working with businesses and corporations at Gordon Reese. And if that's not enough, he now fulfills his passion for supporting entrepreneurs by working with acquisition entrepreneurs to successfully close deals. And if that's not enough, he has been through so many different trainings on communication, and that makes him the perfect person here. Plus, he appreciated my dad joke or office joke of that's what he said. So, Omeed, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Jordan. I mean, what an intro. I don't know if I'm going to be able to follow through on that, but I'll do my best. So,
hey, man, I'll ask the questions. I know you have the answers. We'll make it super easy.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
Learn a bunch. All right, so we're going to dive into our topic today about better communication skills. But before that, I do want to talk about our last episode because it was a killer one. We had Robert Hanna on with us from across the pond. Robert talked to us about building a happier legal community one lawyer at a time. Robert runs a Discord server community of lawyers, as well as a recruitment firm, as well as helping lawyers with some content creation. Really just a cool chat about how to build a community and how to be better to each other as lawyers and the benefits from that. But that being said, I've got Omeed here. So I want to talk about communication. Talk to me. I mean, look, your story is awesome. I think you check like every box of lawyer experience through it. What kind of walk me through what led you to the last jump into supporting entrepreneurs on acquisition to close deals?
Yeah. So, I've been a business lawyer for the last decade. And probably at the beginning of this year, I saw like a swell happening, if you will, like a rising tide on social media. That there were all of these different kind of influencers that started talking about acquisitions. They started popping up, and I kind of started seeing them everywhere. And it was like acquisitions, and like, they were talking about acquiring boring businesses. That's like the big thing right now. Laundromats, storage spaces, parking lots.
Car washes are like $1 million.
Car washes, plumbers, like the HVAC, roofing, blah blah blah, like all these different businesses, right? So, I saw this kind of trend happening in January. And, prior to that, we had been running a general counsel business law firm, providing, these services to up and coming entrepreneurs, doing incorporations and trademarks and contracts, like getting people set up in their business or, getting their businesses into tightening up their legal needs. But as I saw this kind of like rising swell and like all these influencers talking about this, this kind of what they were like, don't start a business, just buy one and you can acquire $1 million overnight, and I was like, okay, cool. I see, the trend of this movement. And the talk around it generally, it's well known, like, during recessions, like, businesses can encounter some issues and people want out, especially with the baby boomer generation, retiring in droves, which is known as the silver tsunami, which is the reason why you see so many lawyers jumping into estate practice, because like, all these silver tsunami people are realizing that they need to, protect their livelihoods and their assets in terms of, passing on the livelihoods that they've created to their loved ones. So the silver tsunami is also creating an opportunity for all these acquisition entrepreneurs. So at the beginning of the year, I talked to my business partner and I was like, hey, I think we should solely focus on acquisition. And I see a strategy for us to do it. And we kind of jumped in with both feet, and it's been a wild ride. So yeah, it was kind of just like noticing like, oh, there's something happening over there, like kind of like listening to the whispers and then turning towards it. So yeah, that's how we ended up doing that.
I love it. The only valuable thing I have to add is I think Alex Hormozy, who is the owner of acquisition.com, I think is like the best knowledge giving account on the internet right now for anything sales, business thought, whatever. So I think I'm assuming he had similar thoughts or started the acquisition being the buzzword of the year or whatnot along those lines. That's great, man.
Yeah, Alex is awesome for sure. I'm a big fan.
So in terms of the communication side of this, like where did you start focusing on your ability to communicate better? Because obviously you've got the government job, you've got big law, you've got the large corporation, you've got the firm now. When did that become a priority?
Yeah, so in 2018, I was dating this girl, and we hadn't been dating for very long. We were dating probably for like 6 months or something like that, and we were arguing a lot. And so she was like, "We should do couples counseling." And I was like, you know what, that could be cool. Like I kind of like approach everything from a perspective of like I could learn something from this, So when she suggested that we do couples counseling, I was like had insurance through Kaiser at the time, and I went to Kaiser and I was like, hey, do you guys do couples therapy? And they were like, no, we don't do couples therapy, but we have this program for couples that's taught by these two therapists, that's based off of a program that's offered by these like two really famous relationship researchers. They're called the Gottmans, if you've ever heard of them. It's John and Julie Gottman. It's this married couple that's been leading relationship research for like the past like 30 or 50 years or something like that.
I can only imagine what their arguments are like.
Actually, they tell a really funny story. Maybe I'll like tell that story after this one in terms of what their arguments are like, because I always kind of like cite to that. But yeah, so she suggested we do couples counseling. My insurance didn't offer it at the time, but they offered this like the seminar in this program. And so we, did the seminar. It was like 12 weeks or something like that. And through that, like communication is a huge part of that, and teaching you how to communicate was like a huge part of that program. And so that's kind of where the bug got planted, because shortly after I did that program, I was like working at this firm, and I got into a dispute with another attorney at the firm because there was like some miscommunication around a case that was assigned. Like she thought it was assigned to her, but it was actually assigned to me. But then it turned out that it wasn't. So there was like this miscommunication, and she came like storming and charging into my office like a raging bull, like fuming mad. And like, it was so insane. She like is yelling at me, and the whole office turns to watch our argument. So like every
this is like open bullpen look. This is everybody has their doors of the open. All right, got it.
Yeah, it's like a cubicle kind of set up in the middle of the office, and then there are offices on the outside where all the attorneys sit with all the support staff, in the middle. And everyone's attention was on us. And like she's like sitting there, she's like digging into me, like super mad. And then all of a sudden, like something like switches on in my head, and I'm like, I literally just learned how to deal with this in the couples seminar. And so I used something called imago dialogue with her, which is like one of the tools that they teach of how to diffuse charged arguments. And it like worked like such a charm that afterwards, like 3 people from the office after this, like after I diffused it and she, walked away and she was like, wow, like thanks, almost like grateful for the conversation that we had. She went from like super pissed off to like grateful for the conversation. 3 people in the office ran up to me and they were like, where did you learn how to do that? And I was like, oh my God, I like learned a superpower or something. And then like one of them was like, would you come to our house and teach my boyfriend how to talk to me like that? Like, and I was like, I might be onto something here. So that was how it started.
So is Imago, is that an acronym or is that like what's?
Imago it's Latin. I can't remember what it's Latin for. It's like Latin for mirror or something like that. I can't remember what the Latin term is.
That's all right. So like she comes to you super aggravated about this case. Like give me a little more specificity of the technique.
Yeah, so Imago dialogue is an active listening technique. It's actually quite simple. So there are kind of 2 stages to it, but the very first foundational stage of Imago dialogue is just repeat back exactly what the person said back to them. Very simple.
So
that's it.
I see you're aggravated because bad communication on this case, yada, yada, yada.
Or it's like, I hear that the way that you feel is, that you're frustrated, that you thought that you had this case, but I can see that, your frustration is related to the fact that there's like a lack of clarity. It's basically whatever they say, you just repeat it exactly back to them. And the reason why it's so effective is because it allows no room for misunderstanding. It makes it so that the person knows, especially in any sort of relationship, oftentimes people here feel really misunderstood, and that misunderstanding is cause for greater conflict, where this leaves no room for misunderstanding. And that's why it's such an effective tool to use.
Well, because as much as we hate the sound of our own voice, we do love our own words coming back to us.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the first step of Imago dialogue, is repeating back to the person what you heard them say. And then the second step of Imago dialogue is relating to the underlying feeling or emotion. So, I heard you say X, Y, and Z, and that must make you feel X, Y, and Z.
I love it. So in this case, what was I hear you saying the issue is blank. Like, what was it in this instance?
Yeah. I hear you saying, it in the story that I told, it was, I hear you saying that the case is yours, that the case shouldn't have been assigned to me, that there's been a mistake that was made, and I can completely understand why you must feel so frustrated to feel that the case has been taken away from you and given to me when you spent so much time, tending to the matter and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, I totally get that you're frustrated, and I would be frustrated too. Now the person is like, oh, they like completely get it. They completely understand where I'm coming from. We're almost on the same team. It's us against the problem, which is one of the things that they actually really teach in couples counseling as well, which it's like, usually it's 2 people that are trying to prove why one person is wrong or more wrong. But if both of you could face and turn against the problem itself, and both of you actively work to solve it, then it makes relationships a lot smoother. So, yeah.
I love it. And was that the end of it, or was there another step to?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just cycling and recycling. So, I mean, after that, usually what you'll find is as soon as you repeat back to the person what you've heard them say, it actually is incredibly effective in terms of diffusing the charge. So there's really nowhere else for the person to go once you've repeated back to them what you've heard them say, because the thing that they're upset about, that they, usually people respond to conflict with they puff their chest out, and they'll come at you with the same energy that you're coming at them, which kind of just creates more of a charge. Whereas what you'll usually find is if you repeat back to a person the thing that they say to you, it'll actually completely remove the charge. And once the charge is removed, the conversation for the most part fizzles out. So yeah, it was like maybe like a 2-minute, 3-minute encounter. It like wasn't long, but like afterwards, like I literally remember, I will never forget that feeling of like, oh my God, like this works.
But like in that instance, did you all then like go to a managing partner and like confirm where the case was, or like was that the end? Like what was the?
Yeah, so the way it resolved was, just relating to her and being like, yeah, I mean, we'll work it out with the managing partner. And it was just like a
Gotcha.
simple email to the managing partner, and the managing partner was like, yeah, I gave the case to Omeed, but you're really upset, so you can just have it. Boom, simple.
And everybody in the office now is like, if you are upset, you get upset at Omeed, and then he will feel better very quickly.
I mean, the thing with these communication tools is like, they kind of have always lived inside of me to a degree. And to your point, in terms of like, if you're upset, come to Omeed, it's kind of funny because I've always kind of said that I'm more of a therapist than I am a lawyer. And it feels like that often because like clients will just kind of call me and want to tell me their problems, like, and sometimes it's about the matter and sometimes it's like literally just personal stuff. And so, it's true. Go to Omeed if you're in need. Go to Omeed is the.
I love it.
Thanks, man.
It's a great slogan there. Well, and it's funny because like obviously there's always those clients who are like, Omeed, how dare you let me do this after you told me not to do this, and I did it anyway, and now it's worse. Please fix it. But but the majority of clients truly just want that sounding board, and especially from the standpoint of you understanding not just what they're trying to do is illegal, but why they're trying to do it really helps a lawyer provide counsel to them. I mean, obviously, counseling, therapists counsel, lawyers counsel, etc. Like, there's a lot of consistency there in getting the right message to them.
Yeah, I think communication as a tool, and it's kind of interesting because when we talk about communication, everyone thinks that means like the way that you speak, and it actually doesn't. Like, that is a part of it, but they say that the best communicators are actually the best listeners. And I actually see a lot of law firm owners really struggling on this point. As you mentioned, like experts, oftentimes experts like have all of this knowledge, they have all this wisdom. And so I think for a lot of lawyers, like when clients come to them, lawyers do a really good job of just like, just blah, 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 like vomiting all of the knowledge that they have, which
According to the rule against perpetuity, we will find that you need should a fee simple 80 years, some whatever.
Yes, and the client's like, dude, I haven't even told you what my I haven't even told you what my problem is. Like, you don't even really know what my problem is. People just want to be heard at the end of the day. So I think one of the most important aspects of communication, like everyone thinks that it has to do with talking, but it actually really doesn't have to do with talking. It has to do more with listening. And that is one of the probably most difficult things about Imago. And it's something that I actually still even struggle with, which it's like, oftentimes, even when I'm utilizing Imago, I've taken what the person said, and there's actually different forms of Imago. There's paraphrasing, there's summarizing, and then there's repeating word for word. And you want to use each tool in different instances. Like oftentimes, if someone has like a really strong charge, you want to repeat word for word. Because if you paraphrase it, they're going to be like, no, that's not what I said, because they're pissed off and they don't want you to be right. And so if you repeat it word for word, they have no option other than to say, yes, that's what I said. Whereas as I mentioned, if you paraphrase it, it does leave room for that conflict to continue to escalate. So there's like different strategies to use these different communication tools. But the crux of all of it is, how presently can you listen? That's really the most important piece of communication, in my opinion. And as I mentioned, I think it's where most law firm owners really struggle.
And to go super meta, but give my 2 cents, if you want to get better at listening, start a podcast and don't prepare for any episode. Like seriously, that is actually my advice. Because like that's I have so many guests like, well, what questions do you want to ask? And I was like, I don't know. I'll listen to what you say. I'll ask the next question. And like I don't think I could do that. I genuinely don't think I could have done that 300 something episodes ago. But like at this point, or I guess 150 something episodes ago. But at this point, I'm like, cool. We're in the moment. I like it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, keep going.
Oh, I was going to ask you, Jordan, the way that we got on this podcast is you had posted a status about how you realized how important communication was, and how in the instances where, you've had the most harmony in your family and in your work has been a result of communication. I'm curious, where did that come from? Like, how did you come to that realization? What's been your experience? Like, I'd love to hear, how your side of the street has got us here.
Sure, I like it. I'm gonna become the guest. No, I mean honestly, like I was reading something that talked about like every good business practice is just a good life practice. Like this isn't like you can screw people over in the boardroom, but be a super nice person in the bedroom or the house, or whatever it is. Like this, all these things being a cohesive person. And then I was reading The Go Giver for like the third or fourth time, and really or actually I was reading the Go Giver Sells More, and it references back to Go Giver, and like literally the entire book of The Go Giver by Bob Berg talks about the 5 laws of stratospheric success, like how you get better referrals, how you drive value to people, etc. But the entirety of the book, there's one scene that takes place at the dude's house, and that's really where it switches. Like his wife comes home, she's complaining, and up to that point, it was always like, you have an hour to complain, I have an hour to complain. And in that moment, he's like, no, I'm just going to give it all to her. Like, I'm just going to do 100% listen. Gets no word edgewise. He thinks he screwed up because he didn't provide feedback or didn't have his turn. The next morning, she writes a nice note of like, thanks so much, Joe, for listening to what I had to say. And then like the entire rest of the book is him like realizing this giving attitude, giving. And so like I brought it back to that, and I was like, you know what, you're right. Like the stuff that works with my wife, but that's probably not the right word. But the stuff that works with my kid, but that's probably not the right word. Like taking that stuff into the business becomes the most helpful. Like when those things are in alignment.
Yeah. Similar to, the realization for me, as part of the couples counseling, to like applicate, like the moment that I realized like where my coworker was yelling at me, I was like, hold on, I have learned something somewhere else. I wonder if I could use that here. Like, poop.
So I know you were saying this is in 2018. You've got this great proof of concept experience. Like since then, what was the next step? I know like the coworker wants you to come teach their boyfriend, but like, what have you been doing to become a better communicator?
Yeah. So actually, for me, so what ended up happening after doing the couples counseling was I was a part of this men's group. And so, this men's group, it's called Sacred Sons. It's an organization. They've been around for about 5 years now. It's, non-denominational, so it's not like a religious group or anything like that. It's actually just about creating spaces for men where they can go to heal. And the idea is that like women have been sitting in circles for, millennia, for, generations upon generations, where they like gather and they talk shit about their husbands, for example, about how shitty they are. And so, but men, other than like going to football games and like crushing beers with their friends, like don't have spaces for them to like talk about what's bothering them in their lives, or what's not going right, or what they're having challenges with. And so this organization creates those spaces for men to be able to get, the emotional literacy, for them to be able to talk about their emotions, for their emotions to be, compassionately heard and held, and so on and so forth. So, just creating spaces for men to, get healing from experiences like that. So,
and like be more vulnerable with each other, be more
be
open.
more vulnerable,
Gotcha.
be more vulnerable, be more honest, like, share what's true for them. This is what's happening in my life. These are the difficulties that I'm having in my work, in my relationships with my children, with my family, so on and so forth. Yes. And like vulnerability, authenticity, for sure. Connection, all those things. Mm-hmm. So I started, going to these events, and initially as a participant, and then kind of moved up the ladder and have now for the last year been a trained facilitator who facilitates the circles. And so what it often looks like is, men will go around, we sit in a circle, everyone shares. And then if there's a man who has, some particularly difficult challenge that they need, more attention given to, they'll move to the middle of the circle, and then a group of facilitators will help them move through whatever it is that they're having a challenge with, usually through a series of questions that are derived from like really deep and active listening. So that is like one of the ways that I've continued to develop my my communication skills. Like, again, really just about the two primary things I feel like are listening and empathy development, like really understanding human emotions, which is like something that I had a challenge with for a significant period of time. And I think, again, a lot of law firm owners don't really delve into that space with their clients, but it's a really important space to be in. For a number of different reasons, because emotions kind of drive everything. You have clients and you want them to take a certain action, and, maybe they're difficult clients, maybe they don't take those actions. Well, you need to kind of like work with what's happening underneath there. So that was one thing. I started hiring a lot of coaches. So I started working with a lot of coaches.
I want to jump in before you go on, because
Sure.
Literally my question originally was going to be, talk to me a little more about active listening, but then you dropped into the listening part and the empathy. So I want to go deeper on those before we continue on. So from the standpoint of, we'll do listening first, we'll do empathy second, are there techniques that you recommend? Is there guidance on this? Like, how do we help somebody be a better listener?
Yeah, for me, as I mentioned, I think, I've actually, looking back, one of the pieces of feedback that I would get from so many people like throughout my life is, you're a really great listener. Like, that's just what people would say to me, like, for a majority of my life. So I think for me, it comes quite naturally and easily. Like, it's just a blessing of a gift for me. I think another thing that, but I'm not going to lean on that too much, because I want to make sure and provide value to the people that are listening. So if people want to become better listeners, I know one of the ways that's really good for me is meditation, just like improving focus and kind of quieting the mind, being in the moment, because listening is just about presence. And so if you can develop that presence to be in the moment with people, and to like not be up here thinking about what you want to say, you kind of need to be aware of what's happening up here, so that you can like kind of tone it down and be like, and then focus your attention, on the moment, so that, that for sure will be one thing that will help people become better listeners. Another thing that'll help people become better listeners is the desire to be a better listener. So as long as like they hold that desire to be a better listener, they're going to find a way. So I think the starting place is to recognize like, hey, maybe I'm a shitty listener, like, and from that place, like, okay, we can work with that. But if you never even have that awareness of the fact that you're a shitty listener, you're just always going to be a shitty listener. Like, so
if you are in any real relationship, whether it's with a spouse or significant other or a mentor or something like that, I promise you somebody will know if you're a shitty listener or not, if you're not sure.
You'll definitely, yeah, you for sure will hear whether you are, but like, there's a lot. I think here's my personal opinion. Most of the world actually are more talkers than they are listeners. So I think most of the majority of people out there are shitty listeners. So let's just start there. Like,
which is funny because if you look at like any social media platform, it's like a 98% ratio of consuming to producing. But yet I agree with you. Like if you're having a conversation with somebody in actual face-to-face contact, it's sometimes often it's a lot harder to get a word in edgewise, whereas then people go on the computer and they're scrolling through everybody else's statements. It's funny, you mentioned always being told you're a good listener. I was always told that I projected well or performed well. But for me, it's exactly what you talked about. Like really just not shutting my brain off, but not sitting there thinking, what do I need to say next? I totally agree with that being such a good, helpful thing towards listening.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you just use that as an anchor, because I still get caught in it too. It's like, oh, what am I going to say next? But as long as I use that anchor of just coming back, okay, let me focus on this person. This person is in front of me. Like, what are they saying? Like, just continuing to like just go into the moment and set that intention of, I want to hear what this person has to say. I think, for sure people will develop the listening skills from there. And then using Imago also will force you to be a better listener as well, because the other part of Imago too is you ask the person. So you repeat back to them either through a summary, a paraphrase, or an actual word for word reflection. And then you ask them, did I get it right? Is there anything you want to add? Is there anything that you would clarify? So just using that tool, the more that you use it, the better you'll get at it.
So I'd also add silence, and like not uncomfortably long silence, but like it is amazing to me, especially in like now that we've done so many of our meetings virtually, I will wait like an extra, maybe half a second before moving on. And there's like times where people like will jump in, we're sitting there for whatever. I don't even know what a normal amount of silence is because I feel like it always feels so much longer, but like maybe it's 2 seconds, but at the like 2.25 second mark, somebody else has something to add or something to chime in with. And so a lot of times I think that can be helpful rather than talking over somebody quickly.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is that embracing, the awkward silence is important. So like making it not awkward, like creating some space for people is important to like exercise your listening skills. Is that accurate?
There we go. I love it. I love how meta we got on the communication stuff. Yeah, totally. All right. So, and then we talked about empathy. And look, we are in law from going back to ancient Greeks, right? You had mythos, logos, ethos, like the logic, the reason, the storytelling, the emotion of it is so core. But I love that you're, singling that part out because I do think we've a lot of times lost that maybe outside the courtroom moment where we are arguing emotion in our case.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think for a lot of lawyers, especially if you're a law firm owner, because as an entrepreneur, like sales, if you're going to be running a successful law firm, sales is incredibly important and you need to understand the function of emotions. Like sales is a whole communication language that's pretty much based on understanding of emotions and utilizing emotions to get someone to move to the outcome that you want them to, which is to buy your services. And so like empathy and understanding of emotions is like a core aspect of that. And so if nothing else, as a law firm owner, like playing in that realm of emotions to ensure the success of your firm, like you need to learn sales. Like you have to learn sales. That probably, if someone were to ask me, should I start my own law firm? I'm like, do you like sales? In general, if you're in business and you don't like sales, like you're going to have a tough time.
Which is funny because for me, the sales listening becomes the most important thing. Like what is this person conveying is their biggest problem? And is that actually the problem that we solve? If not, then like, all right, I think you need a coach first. I think you need to hire more people first, whatever it is along those lines.
Yeah. And when you identify that person is a fit of someone that you want to work with, then it's like, okay, you have to like really understand what the feelings are underneath, what it is that they're experiencing, relate to those feelings to create that connection and rapport so that you can, get them to work with you across the finish line.
And from a marketing perspective, that becomes what you share. I mean, not necessarily I specifically spoke to client X about whatever, but I consistently hear from my clients, they're concerned about, going bankrupt by buying the wrong company, by, not getting the money I need to be healthy after my car accident, whatever. Then like, here you go. You have the story, you have the messaging, you have the emotion that you should be using to market the kind of people that fit with your firm's vibe anyway.
Exactly.
Love it.
That's right. Yes.
Which goes back to all this stuff is the same, or not is the same. All of this stuff is similarly helpful in different circumstances when it is based upon genuineness, trueness, caring, whatever emotion you want to tie to this.
Sorry, the headphones cut out.
No problem. No. So I was calling back to, like, you asked me the question. I was like, oh, the stuff that works really well with my family works really well with my employees. But like here, we're talking about the stuff that works really well there also works well with prospects, also works well with clients. In your case, works well with coworkers and bosses. Like, it's just amazing to me how the similar rules or similar guidelines we want to use are helpful in so many different circumstances when we're doing them from a place of true caring, of being genuine, of wanting to be better for our spouses, ourselves, our clients, our employees, our coworkers, whatever that's going to be.
Have you ever heard it be said that your business is a reflection of you? Have you ever heard that saying?
I have not, but I would say over the last year, I would take that as a compliment, whereas it was an insult before that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it's a compliment now, as opposed to taking it as an insult. That means things are good for you. But yeah, I mean, it speaks to the work that we do on ourselves to further our skills. Because as an entrepreneur, yes, you're really good at. There's like a couple things that you may be really good at, or one thing that you're really good at that like you should focus on. But developing across like a wide variety of skills is going to ensure your continued success until you could get to the place where you could delegate everything. But getting to a place where you could delegate everything, your skills have to get to a certain place where you can do everything well enough so that your business is functioning to the point where you could start putting people where they need to be. And so I say that to say, just to like further develop the point of your realization, which it's like you had a realization where you realized what worked for your spouse, what worked for your kids also worked in your business. And there's a reason for that. It's because as we learn these skills, we can, the growth isn't just related and isolated to our personal lives, because anytime we grow in any respect, our business is going to grow as well. Those are skills that are transferable. So yeah, I completely agree with your position. And I think it's exemplified by the saying, your business is a reflection of you.
Well, and I mean, to take that a step farther, Michael Gerber talks about it in like the E-Myth, where like you do the job, you understand the job, now you can delegate the job so much better, communicating it better because you know all of the steps in it because you've done it. And so it's interesting because like now I think you have so many firms that the owner has been successful enough to lose sight of that. So it's like, all right, how do you keep your employees having the same mindset of making the job better when they go from the coordinator to the director level? And, that was you, and you're up at the CEO level or whatever we want to call ourselves these days, from the lawyer perspective. And I think a lot of that goes back to communicating, whether it's listening well or whether it's delegating well with better communication. I mean, all that kind of stuff.
I love that book. The E-Myth is such a good book. Highly, highly, highly recommend the E-Myth for anyone out there listening. I love that you referenced that book. And yeah, I mean, communication in running a business, it's the success of your business, I feel like, hinges on how well like you can communicate, because it's every aspect of the business, with your customers, with your employees. Like, yeah, I mean, investing in communication skills is not like any investment that you make in communication skills is going to pay off in dividends for sure across like every aspect of your life. So, but it's interesting if people were to ask me like, where should I look for which is one of the questions that you would ask, which is like, where should I look? But there isn't really a program that like teaches business owners how to communicate across their lives. Like, when you had asked, what I suggested was, read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss for negotiation. Like, take couples counseling if you want to learn these other skills. Like, but I don't know of any program that teaches business owners how to communicate as a business owner.
I don't know. I mean, so right now I'm going through the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace, which comes out of the 5 love languages, but obviously like your physical touch means a lot of a different thing in your office, I hope, than it does.
High five.
Right. But so it's interesting, but even that really isn't like, it's not really how you talk to employees. It's not really how you delegate stuff. It's not really how you run a successful business. It's how you show appreciation to them. So taking a lot of that same methodology from love to appreciation in the workplace, but even that is just a small sliver of the things that you can communicate.
Yeah. What do you think what are some communication tools that you use that you've been successful with?
Man, you're putting me on the hot seat. I got the heat lamp right here. No, that's a good question. I always go back to like patterns, right? So the things that work in my house and in my business and with my wife and with my kid, like those are things like, cool, I'll spend more time on learning whatever that next step is, or I'll see an easier way to learning how to bring that to the business in a different respect when it's worked in multiple other places. Otherwise, I mean, I like what you were talking about from that perspective, like the mirroring. A lot of times it's like, hey, can you please repeat back to me what you think I just delegated to you? And let's see where things come up. And, and honestly, like this isn't going to apply to all of our listeners, but like the more I talk to other lawyers who are utilizing VAs who have English not as a second language, the more I think that becomes essential, because there's certain jargon, idiomatic expressions, turns of phrase that just don't translate the same way. And so I see a lot of people they're like, oh, I'm getting this job done for $3 to $15 an hour overseas. They're like, but I'm repeating myself 900 times. And I'm like, all right, well, try making sure they repeat it back to you, that they heard what you said and that what they think you said is what you actually said. But I don't know, man, those little the techniques, that's why I have you on as the guest, right? And hopefully we'll have a couple other guests to give different perspectives or perspectives in different ways on this, because ultimately, like, if you have good systems and you hire the right people, you're going to always be successful. But that requires you to communicate the systems and to communicate with the right people and to get the systems to the right people. So this becomes sort of like the glue that keeps everything else together.
Yeah. And I heard that mirroring is, one of the tools that you probably utilize most and have found to be incredibly successful in the utilization of.
To be fair, I would probably say on the things that I have delegated the best, I used mirroring. And on the things that I delegated that I was aggravated about how they came out, I didn't use the mirroring. So maybe it's the thing that I need to be using more, or whatever it is along those lines.
Yeah. And I also heard you say that your realization is the things that you use with your spouse and the things that you use with your kids are, that's kind of like one of your testing grounds for your different communications tools. So I'm curious, is mirroring what you found to be incredibly successful with your kids and in your relationship, or is there another tool that you've learned in that respect that's been like very successful for you?
That's a great question. So
Thank you.
My wife is a lawyer also, and she is a much better lawyer than I. So I don't even want to say arguments, because I don't think we have them, but like our disagreements are so like not emotional, even though they are emotional. Like it's so logical from like a lawyer perspective that it becomes cool, because it's like, oh, like I feel like we're giving a closing argument to each other in some respects, but like in a positive way, like not in a, not in a truly adversarial way, but like, oh, I looked at, I'm looking at it this way based upon these facts. And then like, oh no, I'm looking at it this way. And you kind of, which takes you back to the mirroring thing. With my kid, I mean, so he's 4.5. So like we finally, I would say in the last year and a half, I can see not that he's just mirroring, but that he's taking what we're saying and doing and applying it to his own worldview and repeating it back to us in a way that isn't necessarily intended. So like the best example I use when we were going through the process of like, what do you do after you burp or fart or whatever? I would always say like, oh, that's gross, say excuse me, or ooh, that's gross, say excuse me. And then of course he started responding back with like, ooh, gross. And I'm like, no, like that was to bring attention to it. Like what you say is the second part of it. So like having to go back and kind of explain it to him in those respects has been super cool, because like it truly gives you like a blank slate of mirroring. Like, when you're talking to another lawyer, an employee, whatever it is, you don't know their whole life story. You don't know their background. You don't know the paradigm with which they're going to think about this. With my kid, I have a pretty good idea what he's been through in life, and I can see how he will make these connections that I didn't intend based upon my, 30 something years of background versus his however long he can remember, which I don't know, might be all of it or not.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing.
There we go. I love this.
Getting a call, so my headphones are cutting out. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And what I got from what you shared is, with your wife, something that you mentioned that I think is incredibly important to point out is when you two are speaking to each other, when you're in conflict, it sounds like both of you are kind of just presenting your positions, not for any other reason other than to say, this is my perspective on things. Meanwhile, one person just listens to the perspective, and then the other person says, this is my perspective on things, and then the other person listens. So there's like no tug of war that's happening between these perspectives, because there's literally just listening and receiving that's happening on both sides. Is that an accurate understanding?
Yes. Well, yes. And I mean, we're on a 13-month road trip. So like we exist in a Jeep Cherokee and Airbnbs or hotel rooms. So like it's funny. That has been an interest, not a couples counseling thing truly, but like, it's so funny to be like, you physically cannot hide anything from anybody in that amount of space. So it's been a blast. Not that I had anything to hide from my wife anyway, but like, it's been so fun to see how close we've come during this.
Yeah, I mean, when you allow someone to completely be who they are and how they are and have the perspectives that they have without you trying to move them or change them or adjust them or shift them, and just let it be and just like listen and receive it, that also is another communications tool that I learned from a program called the Authentic Relating Training. So there's a tool that they use where it's 3 people in a triad, and one person is the speaker, one person is the listener, and then one person is an observer. And so, because listening is like so the speaker is speaking to the listener, and then the observer is literally just watching the interaction between the speaker and the listener. And I bring that up because that also is another tool that's really useful in terms of listening, to kind of step back. And, as we talked about, like a lot of people really just want to, they're just waiting for their turn to say something. But if you take more of like an observer perspective, where you're just receiving everything that's being said, that's a really great way to fall into, the role of a listener as well, as opposed to develop the skills of listening, to kind of take that observer perspective. And I was inspired to share that because of the fact that the way that you talked about how both of you just share your perspectives without trying to like there's no attacking or anything. Like, it's like, okay, you have 3 minutes to share your closing. You have 3 minutes to share your closing. We're not going to comment on what you shared. you literally share your closing statement, and then you sit down, and then I give my closing statement, and that's it. And so the person has nothing else to do other than to just listen during that time. That also actually is like one of the tools that they teach in the Gottman seminar as well. So I thought that was super interesting. So then there was
sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
So it's interesting from what you're talking about here. So from the standpoint of like a small to medium sized law firm, are all of these issues overcomable if we put in the effort and the resources towards it? Or are there truly going to be situations where people just can't communicate with each other in a efficient manner?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because, and it calls on so many different things because, to answer that question, it's like, well, how much effort do you want to put in terms of like, if communication isn't happening smoothly, even with the best tools. If I have a pain in the ass client, even with the best tools, it's not going to make the client any less of a pain in the ass. I'm still not going to want to work with that client. Like, yes, I have these tools, and yes, they're great and they're very effective, but do I like want to deal with a problematic client? Like, no, I don't want to deal with a problematic client. So even with the tools, like it'll make a great team even better. But if there's an issue that is like causing challenges, that it's like not a fit in terms of like culture or something like that, that's creating, additional tension, like, yes, communication skills and tools will address it and make it easier, but it's not going to be the most ideal environment, in my opinion. I think some other things like are probably at play in that respect that need to be addressed, like, a better understanding of your culture, for example, and team synergy and things like that.
All right. So I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. I know we're getting towards the end here. So I'll talk about our next episode. We'll come back to the final nugget of wisdom, biggest takeaway. So next episode is going to be 1:30 Eastern time next Monday. So 10:17 at whatever that is, an hour and 15 minutes earlier than you watch this episode. We've got Liz Wendling on. Liz is going to talk to us about the 3 secrets to convert more consults into clients. I'll bet you communication comes up somewhere in there, but that'll be next Monday at 1:30 Eastern time on the secrets to convert more consults into clients. Omeed, we covered so much here in such a short time. And this is, I got to be honest, I hate the sound of my own voice. I don't listen to a lot of these episodes. I think this is one of the ones I'm going back to re-listen to. But for anybody who's been listening for the last, at this point, 55 minutes, if they remember nothing else that's been said, what would be your biggest nugget of wisdom, your most important takeaway to help more law firm owners be the exhibit A of a successful attorney such as yourself?
Yeah, the biggest nugget of wisdom, I think, and my message to people in general is I would just love to see more listeners out in the world. Like, I would love to see more people be listeners. Listening is a superpower, and it's a superpower that a lot of people, anyone could develop. Anyone can develop the superpower of listening. And the reason why it's such a superpower is, if you want more connection, if you want more sales, if you want more like fullness and fulfillment in your life, like by listening to others, you're actually going to get what you want from them because they feel heard. And so like my one nugget of wisdom is for more people to become listeners. That's what I hope. That if there's like one thing that people could take away from this is like, take a look at yourself and ask, like, am I a listener or am I a talker? And like, have a real honest assessment. And if the answer is I'm more of a talker, like put in the effort to become more of a listener. So I think the world will become a better place with more listeners.
And from a philosophical perspective, emotional perspective, whatever, like when you are truly active listening, you can't be concerned about, that upcoming meeting that you have or the next consultation or the next court hearing. You can't be sitting there aggravated with yourself about how you handled the last consultation, the last communication with a client, the last discussion. Like, you truly are in the moment. And I think it's, Eckhart Tolle will tell you that's the easiest place to find happiness, right? Like the power of now. And a lot of that goes back to just active listening in the moment that you are currently in.
Everything that you want will come from this moment. As long as you're just connected to it, you can get everything that you want from it, for sure. I'm with you, Jordan.
All right. So for everybody who's been listening to this or watching it, hopefully actively listening to this, like Omeed talked about, what's the best place for them to connect with you, especially if they've got a need for clients trying to, buy that business, acquire that company, etc.?
That boring business, that car wash or laundromat, that $1 million just like waiting in the purse. Yeah, so people can find me on Instagram. I'm the Conscious Biz Lawyer. They can find me on LinkedIn, Omeed Tabiei. They can find me on my website, optimistlegal.com, which is the name of the firm. They can find me on Facebook. Yeah. If you want to find me, you definitely can. Those are the best ways to find me. So I look forward to
it. And so this is live right now, but it will be turned into an audio podcast. So for anybody listening to this, it's Omeed, Omeed, Tabiei, Tabiei. So for those of you that didn't watch this live, we can still make sure you get another person. Thank you so much for your time today, Omeed, and everybody who took some time to watch and listen to this. We hope to see you back next Monday at 1:30 for the 3 secrets to convert more consults into clients. With that, have a wonderful week, everybody.